As the state with the largest population and federal tax burden, it's appropriate for Congress members seeking to reduce the federal deficit that they understand the potential impacts here in California, that they are aware of the legislature's budget priorities, and hear our recommendations. Clearly, the most prudent priority at the federal level in the near term is not merely deficit reduction, but overall economic recovery and jobs until the economy is growing and unemployment is on a downward trajectory. In the coming budget year here in California, we will again face grave challenges as a state. As you'll recall, we eliminated 60% of the structural deficit this past year, in part by closing the gap with $11 billion in cuts, more than half of which came from Health and Human Services committees. The economic crisis that we're facing here in California has hit our families and children, the programs that they utilize, very, very hard. The share of Californians who have fallen below the federal poverty line is now over 16%. 2.2 million of California's children, nearly 1 out of every 4, have been living in poverty over the past year. 1 out of 4 of California's children. Given that reality, I simply cannot imagine the additional human costs of absorbing federal reductions to the programs these families need. So today's hearing has several related objectives. First, to educate all of us regarding the federal deficit reduction process and parameters of the supercommittee that I'm sure you've all read about in the press, as I have. Secondly, to identify the potential fiscal impacts to California's health and human services programs and the human impacts on those they serve. Third, to define recommendations for the principles that we advise should guide the work of the supercommittee. And finally, to focus on recommendations that encourage economic recovery, job creation, maintenance of critical health and human services programs, and the state's safety net for the most vulnerable among us.